Hey there, folks, and welcome back into the Northern Football Podcast, episode 215. And it's all three of us back this week. No facial hair for me this week. That was a 1 week experiment, and I don't plan on doing that ever again, really. But Brendan, welcome back to the show, and Alex, welcome back as well.
I'm very happy to bring the comic relief and the facial hair to this podcast, boys.
Yeah, it's nice, Brendan, right? I think the problem with Ben's was his was a little starchy, I think was the word he was using, scratchy. So he didn't get that like soft, beard oiled kind of fuzz where it's actually kind of fun to have and play around with, right?
Mine's getting a hell of a lot grayer than I would like. Like Cristiano Ronaldo's 1 year older than me. He doesn't have any grays. I don't understand why.
He definitely uses just for men. Let's be real here.
Surprised, yeah.
Coleman stuff.
He'll never reveal it though, right? Like that's the one sponsor would make sense for someone his age. No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, that and the mother of his child.
So she should use Grecian 5. Sorry.
No, we don't know the mother of Cristiano Ronaldo.
Oh, got it. Sorry, I didn't realize we were going NFP TMZ. Okay, got
it. Okay, we won't spend too much time on gossip here. Even though there's a lot of gossip going around MLS. We have FC Dallas fans tracking Lucho Acosta's plane, or potentially Lucho Acosta's plane, shades of Shohei Ohtani in Toronto. But we'll jump into the Canadian women's national team just off the bat here. For the first time under Casey Stoney, we have a Canadian women's national team squad. Headline news is that 2 NSL players are in, Emma Regan and Samantha Chang from AFC Toronto and the Vancouver Rise. Ella Oti, Megan Reid, and Nia Rose are also some of the newer-ish names. They've been in the picture a few times before. And Jade Rose is back, but only as a training player. Brendan, your initial thoughts on this first Casey Stoney roster? She's with the U17s right now, too.
Yeah, it's great that she's with the U17s, also so that we can get some more photos of her from Canada Soccer. That's a big help for units like Canadian Soccer Daily. In terms of the roster, I think, as we discussed before, this is a kind of a great first camp and a good setup. It's great that they have different opposition and that it falls in a window where she's able to include as many of the regulars as you would expect. Obviously, there's some key players and some key pieces that are out injured with very serious injuries, Kadisha Buchanan and Chloe Lacasse, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple other key ones off top of mind. But it's great that they get to bring in a couple NSL players as well. We all expected that would be the case. This seems like a perfect opportunity to do that. Those are players that would have been on the bubble of consideration anyway. So it's a really great way for Casey Stoney to begin her tenure, which Alex Gonge-Ruzic correctly predicted way back in August.
Yeah, I didn't have any squad predictions, but this is probably about a 9 out of 10 in terms of what you want from a first squad, because you got all your big dogs, all your regular inclusions. Be good to, as small as it might seem, it'll be nice to see what Jessie Fleming can do under Casey Stoney. What some of the Vanessa Gilles, what kind of leader can she be at the back? Of course, Kaylin Sheridan, given the familiarity. But then there's a lot of other important boxes ticked. There's some young players, some newer players. I know Samantha Chang isn't, she's kind of in her mid-20s, but still at someone where we haven't seen a whole lot of her. She was out in Europe, and now she's come back to Canada. You see Ella Oti, Nia Rose, players we've seen in past youth camps. So you're seeing that, Casey Stoney's mentioned it. Her goal is 2027. It's that World Cup. You got to embed some younger faces other than just Simi Awujo, Jade Rose, and Olivia Smith, who we're used to. And then, otherwise, considering they're missing Kadisha Buchanan, Sydney Collins, Chloe Lacasse, Quinn, and Deanne Rose, it makes you realize, the depth of this team is slowly growing, and it's only going to get better as this professional league that's about to launch takes flight. So overall, I was, not much to note because it was a pretty expected group given the injuries and whatnot, but still enough intrigue that'll make it exciting to keep an eye on the games.
And of course, this Canadian team will also get some competitive games under its belt for the first time in what seems like a while, first time under Casey Stoney, of course. But they want to establish a bit of an identity with these new players, with the new coaching staff. What do you want to see from these games, even though it might not be the most testing opponents, Alex?
Yeah, well, exactly that. Given the opponents they scheduled, it's kind of a range, right? Where it's you expect China's going to be a tough enough match, Mexico for sure, but then Chinese Taipei is not it's going to be one where you expect Canada to control, to dominate a little more, just to kind of show what the system can be about in different environments, really test some new players too. Casey Stoney has this unique chance, like she said, a year without competitive matches, really let's see some of these new players and see if there's any gems there that could step up. Can Emma Regan be a cornerstone of this Casey Stoney system and, be someone to really watch at AFC Toronto. Let's see that tested in this sort of environment. So I think Casey Stoney will do that based on the squad that's named. But I'd like to come out of this maybe getting to know some of these 3 or 4 new faces a lot better than we did heading into it.
There's a familiar face that I don't think we know how they're going to fit. And when we had Casey Stoney on the show and asked about Mimi Aladu, she was very quick to say she's a 10. Yeah, she's a number 10. So I would love to see that, right? She seems to be still in form, maybe not as red hot as she was last year. Brand new opportunity here to make a claim for that spot and make a claim in this team, and someone that we know is an electric talent. And there's some key pieces and electric pieces who are out at the moment. So it's as good an opportunity as ever.
Yeah, I'd like to see them try, a few different things. I wouldn't want to see the same 11 3 times in this tournament because I think you can quickly establish yourself and commit to certain players. But there's no commitment with Casey Stoney. There's no commitment given the tournament doesn't really matter in the level of opponents. Like, you can really use this to just change things up and make a ton of substitutions, change things up during the game as well, and just try, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways of playing through these 3 games and try to see what has sort of the roots of potentially working. And then once you see that, maybe build on that in the next camp. But I think this one is very much for just figuring out what can work for this group and what can't work as well.
I'd be curious to see. I mean, essentially there's 26 players called in, might be 25 because Jade Rose is there, but she's not going to play. I'd love to see all of them. There's 3 goalkeepers, 3 games. Let's see Prue for 90, D'Angelo for 90, Sheridan for 90. Let's see all the center backs. Let's see all the midfielders. I think this is one of those where with the subs, with the fact that it's 3 games in a short amount of time, you have the opportunity to really empty the bench, like you mentioned, and also give players meaningful starts. So I think that is a bit of a unique opportunity, maybe that flies under the radar as well.
And a question from Niles Guo on Blue Sky, and we actually had more questions on Blue Sky than Twitter this week for the first time.
So maybe people are sick of having this the political discourse shoved down their throat. But explain to me how I can watch a video on CSD, on One Soccer, on TSN, on Canada Soccer, and the next video is Alex Jones ranting and raving about something that has his blood pressure boiling, or some other right-wing person who's very pro-Elon and is bashing the old establishment.
I thought Alex Jones's website was bought by The Onion.
Yeah, he had to concede it in part of his, because wasn't he sued for $1 billion or something? So he had to concede it, and now he's just under a new LLC with the same name. Ridiculous. But I can't wait until he's talking about the World Cup, though. He's not going to say anything kind. The world elites are here. The world elites are here, and the CONCACAF making everyone think soccer's a big deal. Oh yeah, it's such a big deal. How come Americans don't care?
Okay, John Stewart.
I would love to. I loved the CONCACAF. That's the first time I've tried that one, actually. I did love John Stewart's CONCACAF joke. Long overdue, and he should go back to them. And we can all this is what we can look forward to. There's going to be soccer jokes on Fallon. What are the other shows?
Seth Meyers, Corden.
Is Rod
on TikTok here?
I'm sure Trevor Noah will have something whipped up.
Yeah, Trevor Noah's got to come back. Trevor Noah's got to come back. It's been a different space. Way too much Alex Jones and those other right wing guys for my liking.
Although I have to say I watched some of the right wing stuff out of comedic value, but I'm so scared to follow any of them on Twitter because then maybe somebody sees that I'm following them, but I don't necessarily support them. It's just that I want to see them for the comedic value. Like JD Vance on Twitter, absolutely unhinged, can be hilarious at times, extremely racist at other times, and I don't need to see that. But sometimes he can be hilarious. Like, you had a thing about dogs the other day that I thought was just hilarious.
Who do you think JD Vance chooses in the Hell is Real derby? That's what I want to know.
Ooh.
Does he lean Cincy or does he go State Capital? Because there's some there's
Cincy.
something about cheering for the team that's not where you live.
Wilfred Nancy ball feels kind of like the antithesis of a lot of what's going on in America. It's very collaborative, very everyone's hands working together towards a common goal. No one's bigger than the team. Not very American, 100%. Is it?
JD Vance still upset that Yap Stam was given such a short leash at FC Cincinnati.
I mean, if you're talking Columbus, Chase Adams scored 10 goals yesterday for the U.S. under-17s. He's a Columbus Crew 2 player. 22-0 win over the U.S. Virgin Islands in the CONCACAF U17 World Cup qualifiers. So that's what my Monday night was all about, was writing about that.
Wow.
You need to watch
nothing
more
about
Jon
Canada's U17s, huh? Look at this American on our podcast.
We'll jump into a question now from Niles Guo. As little as it means considering real-world implications, given Trump's recent order that would ban trans athletes from the LA Olympics and sports in general, does this impact Quinn's place in the team? And does this prevent Canada from having camps in the U.S. if one of our players cannot play? And I think that's a legitimate worry when it comes to, all trans athletes, all athletes that have higher levels of testosterone as well. Track and field is introducing new regulations that would ban an athlete that was assigned female at birth and has a naturally higher level of testosterone. My mind goes to Caster Semenya, who wouldn't be able to compete under these new rules from World Athletics if they do come into effect. But when you consider everything that's going on in the U.S., Quinn is potentially facing issues when playing in the U.S., and maybe that's part of the reason that they've come up to Canada. And then, you could also think, does this impact the professional game in the U.S. as well? Does this impact Canadians that could potentially not get visas to play in the U.S.? Like, that seems a little bit unhinged, but it seems like anything's possible under this presidency. That I think from, Quinn's perspective, from trans athletes and sports perspective, from Canadians that are doing anything in the U.S., including playing professional sports, all of that could change in a way that we've never seen before. And it sounds ridiculous, but I think it's possible. And that would be terrible for everybody, especially Canadian athletes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers to it, right? I think, look, it feels very Handmaid's Tale, what's going on in the United States right now in a lot of ways. And I'm not surprised at all that Quinn feels more comfortable coming to Canada with the opportunity to play in the NSL at this time. What that would mean for them to play in the US. Look, there's so much unraveling. He's signing new executive orders every single day. I just hate to see the divisive discourse that's going on, and there's a lot of innocent people pulled into the crossfire and pulled into very heated exchanges that a lot of people don't know anything about. In terms of how it affects the sports world, I think it's going to take a long time to unravel.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to watch. I mean, in this case, definitely, I'm more curious. Of course, in terms of the actual law itself, would be the terminology used. Because Niles with his Blue Sky post, he added an article, and I was just reading through. I mean, Trump's made it pretty clear for him when he's going after trans athletes the way he has. It's the rhetoric used is men playing women's sports, and I feel like that's the target. So I guess it'll ultimately come down to how that's phrased. Because is it going to be a blanket ban on all trans athletes, no matter what transition you went through, no matter all that? Who knows? So I think that's a bit of a gray zone for Quinn, that we'll have to see how it affects them. But it must be said, it feels like from this Canadian perspective, I'm curious to see how they handle like the question of having so many camps in the US becomes an interesting one now when you look at politically. There's always been like some moments like this where the political discourse between Canada and US is as it is, but when it's affecting members of your team from potentially participating, I do wonder if you're Canada and your leadership, you just step up and say, look, to support Quinn and support other teammates who might be in a similar situation, or other Canadians out there, like, we're just not going to do anything in the US anymore if they start to do just more European camps, more Canadian camps, because it is also an issue no matter what happens with the Olympics, and it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the team. It's just something like, why support that if you when it's affecting your team as it is? And I do wonder if we'll see Canada step up in the way they have, given some of the leaders they have on that team.
There are also potential options with CONCACAF developing a football center in the Dominican Republic as well, that Canada could potentially be playing some of their camps there. Not necessarily games or friendly matches, but they could at least have camps in the same way that they've had camps in Florida in the past. But I do imagine that, the Canadian Soccer Association and every national federation is looking at the US in a very different light at this point, because it suddenly is getting a lot more expensive to host things there. You have the political and societal pressures that come with this presidency as well. And you just layer on everything that's going on in the US and the international relations between Canada and the US as well. Suddenly the warm weather in Florida to host a camp at IMG Academy isn't as attractive as it once was, but there are other Caribbean nations. Canada just struck a trade deal with Ecuador. Maybe that's an option to host a training camp of some sort for the women's national team. Or maybe you do look at Europe or even indoor venues in Canada, like Quebec City has a great indoor venue at University Laval. And that could potentially be something to look at now that potentially Florida's out of the question.
Look, when the Vancouver Rise beat the Orlando Pride in the Canusa Cup or whatever they call this new competition they'll create between the NSL and the NWSL, I don't think the Rise are going to the White House. That's what I'll say.
Well, I'd be surprised if some of the NWSL teams go to the White House right now, given what's going on.
Sure.
But another option, just in terms of I wonder if Canada-Mexico relations, like they've, in the face of a lot of what's been going on, Canada-Mexico has had some pretty strengthened relations. I wonder if on the footballing side we see more collaboration between those two, more camps held, more friendlies, is kind of like a sticking their nose up at the Americans between them.
I'd rather play the U.S. women's national team than the Mexican women's national team in terms of developing where Canada can go, just considering where the U.S. still are in the women's game.
Competitively,
competitively, yeah. But I could potentially see that as well happening with Canada and Mexico relations, even on the sporting side as well. But Casey Stoney, also currently with the U17s right now, they're playing at the CONCACAF Championship. And Brendan, I know you asked her about playing England. They're playing England as we speak.
Well, it's not her team that she's in charge of, so I think we all knew that her allegiances would be tested pretty quickly. But it's great that she's getting involved. She said that she wanted to be involved, much like Jesse Marsh at the youth level. That this is not just about the senior team, and also there could be some players in that squad that are in her 2027 World Cup squad. So I think it's super valuable for her to familiarize herself with the Canadian game and the Canadian player pool even more, to be involved, and for those players to see the top coach come out and just spend time, let alone share a little information. There's it's a immeasurable, that type of impact that something like that can have.
We'll jump into our Canadians abroad as well, and make sure to check out Canucks Abroad on Twitter and Blue Sky for more. I think they're over on Blue Sky. I'm still making that transition myself. It was a debut weekend for Tejan Buchanan as he came off the bench to make his Villarreal debut, picking up 15 minutes in a 2-1 win over Las Palmas. And Ishmael Kone got 20 minutes off the bench for Stade Rennais, making his debut, helping the team pick up a 2-0 win against Saint Etienne. And Kone looked like he was enjoying himself through his debut, and after some of the clips that came out on social media as well, looks like a little bit of a different place than what he was, in Marseille, Brennan.
The team seems like they're having fun. I mean, Alex watches more Liga than anybody, and Rennes were in trouble before they changed coaches, and Habib Bey, former Aston Villa defender, by the way, has completely revitalized this team. And yeah, the word I can use from watching that match, my first match of the year, they look like they're having fun. He came in up 1-0, they went up 2-0. They hardly look like a team that has relegation worries. And 6 points ago, 2 games ago, they very much did. So I'm really hopeful that for Ishmael Kone, he's going to get more minutes in a midfield that seems like it could suit his game, and a team that seems like he can fit into a little quicker than a very imbalanced, star-studded at times Marseille squad that seemed strange once they finally kicked off the season after their pursuit of him in the summer, as we've discussed before.
Yeah, who would have thought getting rid of Jorge Sampaoli, who, again, I don't know, he's flying off of those Copa Americas with Chile, because his managerial career otherwise has been quite tragic, horrific, if anything. Who would have thought that wouldn't work out for Rennes? And that's kind of why I was like chuckling when I saw a lot of like relegation threatened Rennes. It's like, first off, Liga, only 2 teams go down, the third goes into a playoff. You look at Rennes and like They also had like a crazy window. That's why I'm excited to watch the second half of the season.
Mhm.
Of course, seeing Kone come to Rennes is awesome, but like they bought Brice Samba, France's number 3, which is like, or even number 2, actually, probably these days, which is big transfer. They sold Amin Gouiri, but they brought in Kyogo Furuhashi from Celtic, which is another fun transfer. They brought in Seko Fofana from Saudi, former Lens midfielder. They also brought in Lilian Brassier from Marseille along with Kone. Like they made some big moves, and it's a shame they waited so late because like this team could compete for Europe, and I think they're just gonna. It's way too late for that even to be in the possibility. But I'm curious to see who they keep around next year. But I'm really loving the fit for Kone at Stade Rennais, and it's too bad, Brendan, you got to miss me pulling out my Rennes kit last week. But I'm sure I'll have to do it again if Kone continues to ball out.
I saw the YouTube episode of the 90th minute, buddy. I saw it. I said it was a great shirt, and it'll come out again, I think. I'm more regretful that je ne parle pas français, because I would love to watch your daily show on Soccer 1, and I would love to get more in depth into Liga with so much Canadian interest. And let me sidetrack for a quick second. I really think Jonathan David's staying in France. He's going to go to PSG.
No, have you seen Ousmane Dembele? Hat trick, scores again today, and for some reason he's turned into like world's best number 9 for a few weeks.
Yeah, well, whatever Alex Jones product, sea moss or turmeric tablets that he's eating, those are going to run out because we all know Dembele doesn't have the fitness to sustain himself for multiple years at this level. Certainly, right? He's got the talent, but he's never been healthy enough to stay on the pitch for that long. And I think that there's a comfort. I said this before. There's a comfort in France. I think Jonathan David feels, and that's not a team that you say no to. It's a different team than years past, but they want a star guy. Dembele hasn't really taken that mantle, so I think that there's a lot of people there that would talk his ear up that he can be the next Mbappe, Neymar level Ibra superstar guy. And quietly, I think he'd take that. He doesn't have to be as loud as them, but I think that he'd feel comfortable quietly assuming that type of position there.
I don't know if I'd like that. I want to see him test himself in a new league, develop, skill sets that maybe have worked well in France, but he needs to develop another way to attack in a Spain or in England, and I think that could be more exciting for the national team. But
right. Doesn't benefit the national team if he's just the best guy in 50. I get it.
I was just gonna say, but I've not been the smartest when it comes to my Jonathan David quotes in the past. So
French league
maybe PSG is the best spot for him.
I just don't see it happening. I mean, even if you take out the Dembele heater aside, although it's also not surprising, like Dembele's always had this in him. It's just like injuries, and for some reason at Barcelona, he forgot how to like kick a ball straight for a while there. But like he's done this in Ligue 1 before. But they also just signed Kvaratskhelia for like 70 mil. They have Bradley Barcola, who's had a really good season and is going to be one of the future names to watch on the French national team. If Dembele slows down, they still got Gonzalo Ramos, who they have high hopes for. I just wonder if David looks at that and was like, what's the point? I think he's leaving the country. He's had his fun in France.
It looks okay. So you're saying it looks like Kone walking into a Marseille situation, that the odds would be against him. It's too stacked.
No. I think David would rise. I think he's just looking at it as like, why would I go through that when I can go to England and do that, or go to Spain? Like he just strikes me as someone who knows for his. Like that's the thing with Jonathan David. He's a smart guy. Like you can tell he's carefully thinking about his legacy, about his future. Like this is a guy who, he didn't want to go to MLS. He felt it wasn't the right level for him. He made a very shrewd move to go to Belgium, knowing that he would get minutes, he would develop. Then he could have moved up to maybe too big of a step. He's like, no, I'm going to go to Lille. Like they produce talent. They've got all these Nicolas Pepes and Osimhen's and guys that go through. I'm going to go be the guy there. And now he's taking his time. Like he doesn't strike me to a guy who's going to make a move at 25 to PSG. I feel like he's got his sights set elsewhere, and that's why it's so excited to see what decision he makes this summer.
This is a guy that has a podcast already, right? Someone who we describe as being very.
He's in his mid-20s, of course.
Quiet.
He has a podcast.
Of course, he has a podcast. Yes, but in English,
Strava?
in his second language, in English, and as we've all seen in scrums, he gives a bit, but he doesn't necessarily give too much. He doesn't strike you as the type of footballer that would automatically have a podcast. Is kind of my point. he also doesn't strike me as the type of 25-year-old that would go to Saudi Arabia for big sums of cash. But being the face of Qatar Airways and playing for a team that's battling to win the Champions League all the time and winning the French league all the time, scoring goals, still with the opportunity to play at the top level. I just think there's a comfort there that can't be overlooked. And I think that, there is an uncertainty of going to Newcastle, which I think would be the best Premier League situation, or somewhere bigger. I mean, you talk about how difficult it might be to find minutes at PSG, how tragic it can go at Manchester United very quickly. They roll the red carpet out for him, and then people are calling for his head in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I could see that as well. We'll jump into a question from Jeff Salisbury. Who do you see playing a bigger role at their new club, Kone or Tajon Buchanan?
Alex?
I'm going Kone. I'm all in on the Kone to Hen. I think that's the perfect move for him. Tajon Buchanan, I think he's going to get good minutes at Villarreal, but it has been interesting to see that his path to minutes with Baena on the left, like we mentioned last time. He goes out and gets a goal and assist. Incredible season continues. On the right, he'll get his moments. He'll get his minutes. I just think this is a team pushing for Champions League. There's a little more competition. Buchanan's, he's gonna do well on this loan, but he's not dropping in and being a 90 guy right away. Whereas I think for Kone, with the potential, like you mentioned, Habib Bey coming in, he was working in Ligue 2 before with Red Star. He's worked with young guys before and have that reputation. I think Kone is going to be brought along with an eye on bringing him in permanently and down the road. So I think there's going to be a bit more leash, a bit more rope there, so to speak, for him to make mistakes and grow. So I think that will help him in the long term, because that's what he needs.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that for Tajon, it's just about finding the comfort, right? I think for Kone, it's about showing the form that we all know that he has and kind of putting it together, both mentally and physically. But for Tajon, he needs the reps, he needs the opportunity, and he needs to play in the position I think that he's best suited as, which is higher up the pitch than Inter we're trying to squeeze him in for the most part. So I think he'll get that opportunity in La Liga, and it's exciting that we get to pay attention to a few more La Liga games and a new team.
A little bit of chaos for me there as my camera fell off. Apologies to the listeners and the viewers on that one.
It's a CSA product from pre-Kevin Blue. It's okay.
It does. This webcam that's on top of my computer, and it's supposed to make a better picture. I think it does, but it definitely just fell off and disrupted things. So apologies for the listener and the viewer on that. But a big week for Moise Bombito as he quietly found his top form again post-injury, putting in a top shift in a 2-0 win against Lens. With Nice out of Europa League, reducing their schedule, Bombito could be in a good position to finish his first Ligue 1 campaign quite strongly. And Daniel Jebison seems to hate Everton. He scored in a Bournemouth win over Everton in FA Cup action, having also scored in Bournemouth's other FA Cup tie. Quietly, he's making the most of his return to his parent club after a rough Watford loan. But Brendan, I don't think that those Canadian moments in the FA Cup were my favorite, because my favorite was definitely Leyton Orient getting one against Manchester City, and a goal that reminded me of Jonathan Sirois conceding from halfway against FC Cincinnati's Luca Orejano earlier this year.
Great shout, Luca Orejano. Who would have thought two FC Cincinnati references that involve Luca Orejano and JD Vance? That's why we brought them up in the lead up to the MLS season. Northern Football, a podcast like no other. Put that on a t-shirt, Alex.
Yeah, geez. That was to be a podcast like no other. I'll avoid diving too deep into the FA Cup, but that goal did bring a smile to the face, and yeah, definitely some memorable moments. Whenever you see Harry Maguire scoring a 91st minute winner in anything, the fact that it's the FA Cup just feels a little more fitting, right? Just something about that competition. The fact that so many big teams are Liverpool losing to Plymouth Argyle, Wayne Rooney, he leaves, and all of a sudden that club's on the up again. We see Wayne Rooney back in MLS, but yeah, what a tournament that is.
I thought so before.
Surely he gives up this manager thing sooner rather than later. Sorry to cut you off there. Surely he realizes it's just not meant for him.
So what he's going to be a Apple TV pundit? What's his MLS involvement?
I don't know, maybe a GM, or he just gives another shot at coaching. Because I feel like in England, surely after the Birmingham, after Plymouth, wasn't he at Derby there for a while? Surely they've just realized, okay, he's not going to come in and teach the forwards how to score, yada yada yada.
At Derby, he was successful, right? And so was Frank Lampard, and both of those guys left too early. I think he left Derby too early, and I think he made a misstep by thinking it would be easy in MLS because it was familiar. I think he was trying to prepare himself for a Manchester United job, which seems way over his head. But the reps and the kind of low pressure, low profile opportunity he thought he was getting in MLS, I don't think that he grabbed it, with two hands correctly, to be honest. And he gave up on it too soon. I think that the opportunity was there to achieve what he was trying to do. To be honest, I think he would have been supported and backed as well. He just needed to be a little more patient. He jumped at the first opportunity to get back to England. I see the appeal in that. Certainly, with the big names involved in Birmingham at the time, he's a very confident person that believes in himself. But I think he's hurt himself in MLS. I really struggle to see a team unless you get a situation where it's an ex-teammate, someone in a David Beckham level position, but he would never get the Miami job. So I don't know where that would be.
Yeah, I mean, Miami's gone down that route before as well. Lionel Messi's effectively the sporting director now at this point. But Rooney isn't going to get a job like that as well at an Inter Miami type club because they already went down that road with Phil Neville and it didn't work. Like we forget how bad that Miami team was for a while, not to turn this into an Inter Miami podcast.
But if Phil Neville had a different job, like at one of the LA jobs, I could see Rooney wanting to try it in the States again, and because he enjoys the whole package of it. It's not just in the coaching. I think that would be his way, and I think he loves the game too much, and he wants to be good at management that he can't kick it. He can't give it up, and I can't see a team trusting him to be the general manager when he hasn't really proven that he can do it as a manager.
And we'll jump into the Canadian men's national team as well. A bit of a slow news week, but a fun story from Matthew Shinetti, friend of the show, that Dane St. Clair has taken pole position in the goalkeeper race, but that things remain pretty open between him and Maxime Crépeau. Speaking of, how big is the start of the season for both, especially as Crépeau looks to regain the starting spot in the Timbers goal, which seems like a wild thought that he is not a starter in MLS, at least a guaranteed starter. And are there any other battles that we should be watching ahead of the Nations League final?
Your NFP's Tom Bogert I haven't been paying attention to Timbers preseason, but is it James Pantemis and Max fighting it out for the gloves?
They've been splitting it so far. It's hard, as you know, to find any details about MLS preseason. But once again, it's Pantemis and Crépeau splitting it. But if Pantemis is the number one, could he be potentially in that Canadian picture as well? Could he be starting games for the men's national team? Like, why is Pantemis better than Crépeau at Portland, but Crépeau is leaps and bounds ahead of Pantemis on the national team? It doesn't quite make sense on paper. When you consider everything, it makes a lot of sense. But I think it's incredibly important for Crépeau to get back into that starting role.
Well, it makes sense because Neville's an old school guy, right? He's not like, you can kind of see it in his style. He's more of like a people's manager stylistically. Like, he doesn't want his goalkeeper to be doing anything crazy. That's what Crépeau's best at. He's best at when he's flying out like a center back, making last ditch tackles and sweeping and all that. So it doesn't surprise me in hindsight maybe to see a little of a stylistic clash. I thought it was interesting in Shinetti's article that Crépeau kind of referenced that him and Neville had some philosophical differences throughout last year, which ultimately led to this happening. So I think that's something where it's just wrong fit, wrong time for Crépeau. And I'd be very interested if Pantemis like takes the gloves to start the year. Like, for example, if I'm TFC, like, you make that call, be like, okay, what's the price? What can I pay to bring in a Crépeau back to Canada? Because it's something where Crépeau can be an MLS starter. He can still be a top 5 keeper in the league, but it's just funny and ironic that he's ended up in the one spot competing with the fellow Canadian where he won't be valued as such.
And a big week in the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well. Alex, I know you made your way over to Vancouver Island for Cavalry beating Pumas. Santiago Lopez getting on the score sheet in a goal that looked a lot like it was from the Azteca a few years ago back as well. But just how was that to see Cavalry pull off such a win against Pumas?
Yeah, it was funny because I ended up going with Sam Rowan, my co-host of the Third Sub. We were just, made the trek out and didn't know what to expect. Neutral site. Was it going to be a bit of a dead atmosphere, dead game? Pumas, would they dominate? 'Cause that was kind of the vibe last year. Orlando Cavs was a fun game, but Orlando kind of ended up dominating the scoreline in the end. And it blew us away. Like everything about it, from the crowd, like the Cavalry fans really showed up and brought great numbers, but also Pumas. I mean, it's a Mexican team. We've gotten used to that. No matter where they play, they travel well. The crowd was fun. The game was entertaining. Like Cavalry was really giving it to Pumas back and forth. Pumas wasn't starting a bad lineup. Like they still had Regilio Funes Mori leading the line. Starlight, which is an insane throwback to see him still leading the line for a Mexican team. And like Cavalry just went out and played Cavalry football. Like for them, it looked like it was York United away in August. Like Tommy Wilden Jr., despite the offseason, tuned them exactly the level they need to be. So it was an incredible game. And it was something where it kind of set in the 80th minute when they went up. You're like, it's actually like a way bigger result than we've come to realize, just because of everything about the game and how quickly it came up. So it's so cool to see them get the job done and hang on the way they did.
Christian Jack called it the most important victory in the club history, some 3-4 months removed from them beating Forge to win the CPL title for the first time. It's awesome to see, and I don't think that that's an exaggeration, to be honest. You know, the Pumas are a giant in Mexico and on the continent, and yes, they were missing a few regulars, and Santiago Lopez might not get that start or have that opportunity in the middle of the season for the two of them, let's say. But it seemed like a pretty special night for you and everybody out there. So it's great to see. What is that trek though? Like the game ends at 11, 10. You get home at what time? Like that's 3 hours each way?
You get home the next day because the ferry service stops at 9 normally for some reason. I don't know. For some reason, they have like midnight ferries from Nanaimo, Vancouver, but they don't for Victoria.
What?
So you go crash somewhere and maybe you go see a buddy in town, and then you have a cracker bright and early the next morning. So the night games in the midweek are always a bit of an adventure. The 2-3 o'clocks on the weekend are great because you can do the back and forth, but gets a bit crazy.
Yeah, we had a northern football trip out to Starlight Stadium a few years back for the Canadian Championship.
Whitecaps Pacific 2023, I think it was.
Stayed in this laneway house of a family that refused to come out and say hi from Airbnb. And I slept on this leather couch and woke up feeling like I was sleeping in a plastic bag because apparently youngest gets the couch as Peter and Alex got the beds for that one.
I think there was some sort of rock, paper, scissors, but I can't comment on the final results or how it
Make it
out.
an athletic competition next time. Well, maybe not next time, because the next time would involve me and you would win. But if you ever are with them again, make it an athletic competition, Ben. Bet on yourself.
Hey, Alex might beat me at this point. He's been logging more kilometers running than I have over the last few weeks. So he's stealing my Northern Football beep test crown at this point.
Oh, half marathon AGR versus decathlon Steiner. Come on.
Yeah, I'm just filling in because Ben wants to be a multi-sport athlete. I'm just running for, I don't know, someone roped me into a half marathon, so I may as well train for it properly, right?
There you go. Good on you, man. Let's you'll be our Damian Warner of the show, Ben. Don't worry.
No.
And in MLS news as well, the Whitecaps officially signed Emmanuel Sabi. CF Montreal signed Luca Petrasso as they continue to pick up scraps from other MLS teams, as well as Dante Sealy and Brandon Craig. And it seems like CF Montreal is just like picking up guys that aren't settling in at other clubs.
Well, say if you want to have a bit of fun and you're well acquainted with Quebecois French, go read the quote tweets in the comments on the Luca Petrasso signing. Like some of the things they were saying, they're like, another freaking Toronto guy. Like, okay, like Marshall Rudy was fine. He was a young, hot prospect, good player. Okay, Prince of Wuzu, like, là, ça exagère. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Petrasso, for whatever reason, was like the thing that sent everyone into like rage mode. Yeah. They're like, oh, there's another Toronto guy. Like, do you guys only know how to scout Toronto? Like, sign some Quebecois. So it's funny that Montreal truly have leaned into like a pure Moneyball approach. I think Petrasso's it's going to be a good signing. I liked him at TFC, at Orlando. He had some really good moments before injury kind of derailed his time. Like it's going to be a good, savvy signing. But it's funny that the fact that some of their Moneyball targets between JMR, now Owusu, now Petrasso, they sign a fourth guy. I think some guys might genuinely give up their season tickets. So no more Toronto, even if it's one of the Italians.
It sounds like the feed's already become a Jones Alex reaction after signing with TFC guys.
The thing with Montreal though is I look at the club, they're not going to spend the money, and I fail to think that this is actually a Moneyball approach. We use the term Moneyball a little bit more leisurely now. The fact that like you go out and you're a budget like budget-like club. But the term Moneyball came from smart signings that were a budget-like club, smart signings that fit a specific system. I'm not sure there's a specific system with this Montreal project.
I think so though. I think like what you've seen, there's been a pattern of like, at least financially, the analytics side, hard to tell because I don't know if they are rated as one of the higher analytics teams. I forget because I know American Soccer Analysis does a great job of like analyzing which teams are known for being good analytically and which ones like don't even have a department. But like it has been interesting that they find a lot of loopholes, like bringing in Vrioni as a DP. I know a few years ago they had that one of their DPs was purely a DP for accounting purposes so they could keep the budget down. Like there is a very shrewd system going on. And the fact that they had that success under Nazi shows that like there's a semblance of a blueprint. But yes, now it definitely feels a little scattergun, but there are enough bets on like guys like Sealy, Petrasso. I'm intrigued by it. Like they're making enough moves where I'm like, okay, there's something there. Dukes, a lot of these guys. So I mean, I'd be curious to see how this year goes now that it's year 2 under Laurent Courtois, because the fact they made the playoffs last year with the roster they did makes it interesting to see what he can do in year 2.
Yeah, they're making more low risk, potentially high return moves than they have in the past, and that's why it seems surprising. But they also have consistency for the first time in 4 years, and I think that there is a bit of a system under Courtois, and you know maybe that's not the case with all of these guys, but Prince Owusu fills some big shoes. Jaquil Marshall-Rutty seems like on brand for the type of player that they would love to develop themselves. Wasn't getting the opportunity, is affordable enough for them to take a risk and give them the opportunity. And you know, I think we all think that they'll end up selling Jaquil Marshall-Rutty on somewhere in Europe and be able to cash in for that. So it does seem like they're making smarter decisions than other MLS teams in the past when they'd use your perfectly coined scattergun approach. I don't think they're making as many decisions that will blow up in their face as other teams when they have the same approach.
And it's certainly going to be interesting to see the MLS season get started, the CPL season get started after, you know, Forge and Cavalry have already started in CONCACAF Champions Cup. NSL starting as well. The Whitecaps Girls Academy has officially rebranded to the Vancouver Rise Girls Academy as well. I think that's a fantastic move. No word on what it means for the CONCACAF Champions Cup spot yet. And the CPL and domestic seasons are just around the corner. That's all we've got for episode 215 of the Northern Football Podcast. For Brendan and Alex and our producer, Michael and Brett, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to tune in on the 90th Minute YouTube channel as well, and follow us on all our socials. Lots of fun clips coming up on our Instagram in the near future as well. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next time.